Welcome back to the channel, guys. I am the Drunken Goth, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at what is involved in the strip down, rebuild and restoration of a Ferrari 330 front suspension system. So we get the car up on axle stands and get the wheels off so we can have a good look around before then moving into the engine bay and removing these two caps on either side, which once removed will reveal the top of the shock absorber. Once we've got access to that, we can drop the bolts out and then start to remove the shock absorber from the front suspension. Once we've got that out of the way, then we're going to move on to dropping the brake caliper off the front upright. So before we do that, necessarily it's easier if we drain all the fluid out just so we don't start making a mess everywhere. Easily done with a brake fluid vac bleeder, and then we can drop the caliper out of the way and start moving on to the next part. Next we get the spring compressor involved and compress the front spring, taking all the load off it, and drop the top arms out of the way. Once those top arms are out of the way, we can then start releasing the pressure on the spring and take that out of the way. So essentially everything just drops down and drops out of the way. The kingpin is left behind on the bottom arms, but the hub, the dish shroud, the disc, everything like that comes off all in one piece, and that is now out of the way, ready for sending for restoration and rebuild. Once all that's out of the way, we can focus on taking the rest of the pins out, the washers, the nuts, and starting to separate everything down further while it's on the bench so that each individual part could be sent to be blasted or powder coated depending on what finish needs to be applied to it, or then sent off so it can be replated, again depending on what finish it should be as original. And here we can see after it's been blasted, some of the plating comes back and it looks stunning. Originally a lot of this would have been CAD plated, but obviously since you can't get that done anymore with it being toxic, it's silver zinc that we go for now, which is as close to an original finish as possible and is perfectly acceptable for Ferrari Classiche. Once we've got all that plating and powder coating back in as close to original as possible, we can now start the build-up process. So starting off with the hubs, the aim generally at this point is to try and build as much of it up as possible on the bench and then essentially refit it the same way as we took it off. So try and get it as complete as possible and then bolt the entire thing back in one go. So at this point on the hubs, we've got the steering arms back in, the caliper mounts are back on, and we move on to the two disc shrouds freshly powder coated and just start building it as much of this back up as we can. New nuts and bolts wherever we can, as close to original as possible, and just try and get it as close to being back together as possible, as I say, on the bench before moving on to trying to bolt the whole thing back into the car. Now, with this being an old-fashioned suspension setup, we don't have the traditional bearings and ball joints that you would find on more modern systems. So we have these needle rollers that are then inserted into the upright, and this is what the kingpin is going to sit against so that the car can turn while steering. And then these Bakelite like tubes which go into the kingpin, which assist with the up and down motion, obviously as the suspension is working. On the body side, we have this combination of copper and fabric washers, which again allow the movement of the arms up and down. And this, with the age of the car, is obviously a very old-fashioned setup, but at the time worked very effectively. So once we've got most of that ready, we're going to move on back to the uprights and essentially finish assembling them minus the top arms, as we are going to mount the uprights by the bottom arms and then get the spring back into place, move everything back up, and we're going to fit the top arms last. So as you can see, we're nearly finished now with these uprights, everything looking shiny new, exactly as it would have done when it left the factory. Calipers are even back on at this point, new grease nipples, and we are just about ready to start moving these back to the car. So once we've got them next to the car we get the new pins on the body side. They're going to be reinserted into the chassis, and we're going to fit those copper and fabric washers. And once we've done that, we can fit the bottom arms complete with the upright, hang it basically in place for now. Once that's hanging there in place, we're going to get the top arms and keep them close by while we use a strap to hang the upright roughly in position, and then get that compressed spring back into the mix. So once we've got everything hanging, as you can see in the next picture, roughly in position, that spring then goes back in. We can then reattach the top arms whilst that spring is still compressed, get everything sat nicely, release the pressure, and then everything should be held in place, as you can see here. Once that's done, all that's left is to get the roll bar back in, reattach the steering arms, and then we can put those two shocks back in place, and then essentially we are done. That is the full built 330 front suspension, and then we can get it back down on its wheels and now back to being a rollable car. Well, that is it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like on it, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all on the next one. Bye bye.